So you're talking about this PTSD, and the police department isn't treating you guys for this, right? They're almost acting as if this is a weakness if you admit you have a problem, which I think is the opposite of what they should be doing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. Police officers are human beings. They're just like anyone else. We experience fear, and we know that the bullets can kill us, but there's a culture out there that's a macho, misogynistic culture that you don't show weakness, you don't show fear, and you'll get officers that are saying you're a you can't handle it. They label these officers who are not heavy-handed, who don't use excessive force, and so when you look back at 1992, that year when Daryl Gates said this is an aberration, I had to look up the word aberration, because I was like, what does that mean, aberration? And basically what it means is it doesn't happen.
And you knew that was false.
I knew that was false because anybody that runs away from the police, they know what to expect at the termination of a pursuit, and so that was a flat-out lie, of course, and I began to see certain things at that point, but I was still very loyal because I wore the blue uniform. I bled blue.
You bled blue, which is, that's what you do when you're in that. See, I think what I want people to understand from what you're saying is that when you're in that environment daily on a basis, and you almost get a little bit brainwashed to these ideas that if I don't use excessive force, if I don't pull, shoot now, ask questions later, I'm a bad cop. My friends are gonna make fun of me. They're gonna call me a pussy.
Right.
I mean, people need to understand that this environment's so toxic, and this toxic environment is one of the things, if we're gonna change all of these problems, is one of the things we're gonna have to address and look at. You had something that you mentioned to me called the super pig syndrome.
Right.
So I want you to walk me through what super pig syndrome is. It's an interesting.
Well, the story that I always like to mention was when I was a probationer in Rampart, and I had a Caucasian partner, and we saw, lots of immigrants there, mainly undocumented, as they say, illegal. And he pointed out a car. It was a family, Mexican family, dark-skinned, like me. And he said, look at them wetbacks, I bet they don't have a license. So I didn't say anything, I just kind of stayed quiet because he had some time on and I was the rookie. And
that's shocking to me. He almost looks at you and doesn't even realize what he's saying is racist, or in that it actually is offensive to you. I mean, that's how far gone some of these guys are?
Yes, absolutely. Some of them are deliberately very racist. And I'll go on and I'll talk a little bit more about that, especially about the black community. I'll get into that too. But he says, look at these wetbacks. I bet you they don't have a license. Let's go take away their car, essentially. And so what happened is he pulled them over and gets out the kids. There was about 3 kids, the wife and him. And the kids start crying because they're scared. The man's just kind of with his head down. I'm translating for him. Do you have a license and registration? And of course he didn't have one at that time.
And had he been doing any illegal driving of any sort?
No,
so it was just the fact that he was Mexican. This guy wanted to screw with him.
Right, he wanted to screw with him. He wanted to teach me how to write a ticket and how to deal with people. And that was just the way that he did it. And so I began questioning the male driver, the father, the husband here. And he was just very ashamed. The wife was sad. She had a very angry look. And the kids are crying. And so it was at that moment when I learned, okay, this is why they call us pigs. I didn't really understand why do they call
what does that come from?
What does that come from? And so I woke up at that second right there, and I was like, man, this is pretty messed up.
Pretty up,
yeah. And so I had another situation too, again, another Caucasian officer, and just being in that environment, we arrived at a residence there where it was reported by a neighbor as having suspicious activity. So we go inside, we start searching the house, we knocked on the door, of course no one answered. And we went in, it just smelled very bad, very putrid, like feces, urine, and as we're walking around in there, there's cockroaches scurrying all over the place, refried beans, and we went into a room and there was 20 undocumented immigrants. It was a location, a stash house, and I was like, oh my gosh, and he was like, dirty Mexicans, you know,
Yeah.
and that's where he came out with my partner. You know, look at these dirty Mexicans, and so again, you know, I'm hearing this
Literally
same thing.
zero self-awareness. Yeah.
Right, there's zero self-awareness, and I'm quiet again. I have family in Mexico. I've been there. I know that these people are poor and that they're trying to come down here for a new life. And so I began seeing that early on. And I also witnessed other officers, some of them people that I knew I was very close to, who would talk about the black people in a very bad way. They referred to them as fun people. And
As what?
Fun people. And
That's a new one on me.
Right, well...
What's the origins of that?
Well, the origin, it's another acronym, but it stands for f***ed up N-word, you know? So, I mean, I'm not going to say that here right now, but I mean, this is how...
And that was fairly common in the 90s?
It was very common, yes, it was very common. So I saw the racism.
Yeah.
I myself, at some point, I became a racist too. How that is possible? You know, a dark-skinned Mexican like me, Chicano.
No, I believe it.
You know, and you become brainwashed. You want to be one of the guys. Okay, you don't want to be an oddball. You want to have backup. You want to be cool. You want to be macho. Accepted, all that, and so that was kind of the insular subculture that we were involved in.
It almost sounds like some of the tools a fascist government uses to control people. You know what I mean? Like some of the things that you're talking about, like seeing yourself, even though you're part of this other group, still being able to other them in order to get along in that environment, right? To feel accepted. That's very scary. And I don't think it's uncommon. I mean, we have a lot of Hispanic police officers, and I've often wondered at some of these protests when I see them, like, how is this like a thing? Like, how is it that brown officers and black officers are in that environment doing what they're doing? And I did speak candidly with an LAPD officer that was African American, and he did mention to me that there was racism within the department, that he'd been targeted for racism. And I was like, then why are you still part of the systemic racist culture? And he kind of had a pause, and he didn't really have an answer for me other than, this is my job. So I guess, you know, I could see what you're saying. Like, if you're in that environment, it's your job, you're doing it. Sometimes it's hard to step away out and look in from the outside at what's going on. That takes a tremendous amount of will, I think, which is obviously something you were able to eventually do.
Well, yes, but I was already gone. I wasn't in there.
Oh, right. Okay.
When you're in there,
yeah,
you have to play that game.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, I'm not going to do this, because then you get blackballed. Right. You won't have your partners backing you up, like the great Serpaco. Okay, what happened to him?
Yes, let's talk about Frank Serpaco for a second. So for folks that don't know who Frank Serpaco is, he's probably the original lamplighter. He was with the New York Police Department in 1971. He came out and talked about the corruption that was going on, and court cases ensued. And obviously he was very much retaliated against for what he did. So he was very brave, and I think... you know, still at it, right? You speak with Frank? Or?
Yes, well, you know, through Twitter, and I've spoken to him personally on the phone with him too before.
He was before his time, right?
He was way before his time. I mean, the guy is amazing. You know, there'll never be another person like him. I believe that, especially at that time period, early 70s. Corruption was everywhere. Graft was a part of the NYPD. Everybody from the top to bottom, all the way up to the chief, the mayor, all these people that knew that this was a way of doing business.
Right.
And the same goes today with modern law enforcement, just like when Daryl Gates tried to hide the ass whipping that they gave Rodney King. Well, this is an aberration. This goes on. And
he knew it wasn't the exception to the rule. He knew it was the rule, yet... He also knew that if people thought that was the case, they would not continue to support the LAPD. So.
Correct. And that's the problem here, is that, you know, we've made these police officers be like heroes. We worship them. And I think that's very misguided, because they're human beings. They fuck up too. They make mistakes.
Yeah.
And we put them up there so when they make mistakes, they're not counseled correctly, because they're supposed to be perfect, you know, or it's covered up, you know, whatever it is that they're doing.
Right.
And so Frank exposed the elephant in the room. I mean, it was just a massive elephant. It's like tantamount to this whole Catholic Church scandal.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Where you had the popes, you had all these priests. Everybody knew what was happening to these children, to people who were killed, all on behalf of religion. So you have these professions of being a priest, being a cop, where, you know, they're very heavily into the code of silence. They're very much controlled by these insular subcultures where you don't say shit.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.